Good morning, everybody. Dear Chairman Andreas Persidis, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here today with you, and especially my pleasure to talk about our global external innovation ecosystem and our concept to boost innovation and entrepreneurship in the worldwide ecosystem that we all act in. And Jonas already mentioned that these HBios, these, let's say, support functions are super important for the different companies to grow capabilities, but also to connect and collaborate worldwide. So I'm, as Jonas mentioned, I'm a scientist and a physician by training. I still own a professorship at the University of Heidelberg, so I'm still connected with the medical school. At the same time, I'm in industry. I've been in industry now for almost 18 years. So I've walked through global R&D positions, medical affairs, into the business, and I've been heading new business development in the EMEA region in the last 7 years. So I've been doing license and acquisition deals, but also strategic partnerships. And actually, 3 years ago, I've had an accident, and during the accident and all this medical, let's say, procedures and rehabilitation, I realized that there are so many gaps that we need to close altogether. And that's where I and my family actually we started a startup, and we raised funds, and we walked through all these different steps that many of you have been walking through. And that's where when Melinda Richter, who has been our global head of JLABS, which is our incubator and accelerator at Johnson & Johnson, when she mentioned we're going to move to EMEA, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, I said, I want to do that. And that's where I moved in, and I'm happy to be with you today. I'm heading JLABS now in EMEA now for the last 6 months, and we are growing into the region. And it's my pleasure to be here, and I'm walking you through now through our concept and our principles that we have deployed worldwide. And just a bit of background about Johnson & Johnson, and you heard about Janssen. Janssen is part of this HBio. Janssen actually is the pharma sector, but we also have consumer and medical device sector, and we are worldwide operating more than 250 companies in 175 countries. And we are one of the biggest ones. Sometimes we claim we are the biggest ones, then you see a merger, then someone is catching up. So if we say we are one of the biggest ones with 130,000 people worldwide, I think that's a fair statement. And this is a bit about our portfolio. Many of you know in the consumer business products like OB, Carefree, Rock, and Neutrogena. Many products are out there. In the medical device sector, you know eventually the hip replacement, the hip and also the knee replacements, Biosense Webster, in the area of cardiovascular, and in the pharmaceuticals, which currently is the main part of our business, almost 60% of the business. Many people may know products in HIV, hemato-oncology, but also in CNS and in immunology. And you may imagine that this, let's say, portfolio needs to be refreshed faster and faster, and that's where we pretty much rely on internal discovery and research. But while we have eventually thousands of people inside, there are millions of people outside, and that's where it's absolutely important for us to also collaborate with the external ecosystem. We have let's say saying developed in the past weeks, where we reflected on the past, where we have been fishing and hunting for opportunities, where we have been on these business development partnering conferences, and we really looked out for the opportunities to license and acquire. But a part of this kind of fishing and hunting, we also need to do some farming. That means collaborate in nurturing, eventually venturing these opportunities. And that's where we might move to the next step, and that's where JLABS come in. And if we recall the phrase of and the note of our Chief Medical and Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Paul Stoffels, he's saying, innovation at Johnson & Johnson is about creating strong networks of people who can combine resources, ideas, and technologies in a new way. And that's also where we need to deploy resources to the external environment. And that's what JLABS is about. And this is a snapshot of our current global external innovation ecosystem. It's very busy. You see the map. You see that we are very rich in terms of locations in America and North America. The blue dots are the so-called JLABS. The JLABS are physical incubators and accelerators that we have built. You see the red dots? These are the innovation centers. In the innovation centers, we have the key scientists and the transaction people who do the deals. And you see, coming from the West Coast in US, moving to the East Coast from US, you see the first innovation center and the JLABS in Europe, based close to Antwerp, and the innovation centers in London. And you see in the next spots growing in Asia, in Shanghai. So also there we will have a JLAB, and we already have an innovation center. It's very important that we have this intimacy between the lab, the incubator, and the deal makers. Because at the end of the day, we want to farm, we want to nurture innovation and science. At the same time, we are very interested in signing deals. And I will tell you later that we are already at a range of 25% of companies that we pull into the incubators, accelerators that we sign deals with. We already have Innovation Center, and we have JLABS at the West Coast, San Francisco, San Diego, Houston, Texas, but also Toronto, New York City, one satellite in Boston, and as I said, in Central Europe. You see these violet, let's say, initiatives, and these are the QuickFire Challenges. I will talk about that later in a minute. The QuickFire Challenges are competitions that we bring to the world as an opportunity for the science to apply to. And I know that Greek companies have applied to global QuickFire Challenges. And these QuickFire Challenges are asking startups to apply for grants. These grants can start at €50,000 and they go up to €750,000. If it's about the lung cancer initiative, the lung cancer science request for applications, of course, this needs a larger budget than a lab coat competition that we also ask for. So this is the ecosystem. I will come to that slide later on to talk about the individual opportunities. When talking about our global external innovation ecosystem, this starts with the JLABS. The JLABS is a classical incubator. I already mentioned 12 sites across the globe. And currently we have more than 450 companies in our portfolio, 450. And we have more than 20% of the companies in discussions. And out of these 450, 100 of them have already signed deals with us. And we are engaging across all sectors because we need to boost innovation in the consumer health sector, as well as in the device sector, as well as in the farm sector. We are a bit heavy for the time being on the farm sector, but as digital health catches up, we see companies moving in the digital health space across all of these JLABS centers. In the innovation centers, these are full deal teams, as I already mentioned. We have 4 innovation centers in 3 continents, and lots of deals have been signed, more than 6,500 opportunities screened. JJDC, it's a Johnson & Johnson development company. This is a classical VC. It's our corporate VC. That means we invest into startups, we invest into companies, and we very, very often co-invest. I will come back to that, because while we invest, we have others sitting next to us, also VCs or even family offices, that also invest into companies. That means we have partnerships with investors. That means we have an ecosystem, or let's say a community of investors that we bring into all of the discussions that we might have with all of you. And then we have Johnson Business Development, where I came from, where I've been leading new business development in the EMEA region for the last 7 years. And that's where we sign late-stage deals, post-proof of concept, classical license and acquisition activities happen there. At JLABS, we are catalyzing innovation to deliver the transformational solutions to people globally. And I will walk you through what we serve, but at the same time what we have achieved so far. And as Andreas already mentioned, and Jonas, I will be available during the coffee break and also during the lunch session and the lunch break to interact with you if you have interest in joining this ecosystem, or if you have questions I can clarify. I mentioned that this is the map. Let's currently focus on the Central Europe hub. But whenever you are part of this incubation system, this incubator, you have a seat across the world. This might be super exciting for companies if companies move into bears, do their first experiments, and then want to expand to China or to US. So that's where you immediately are part of a global ecosystem where you can leverage resources and eventually just a desk in New York City. So this is the map, and this is what we serve the companies with. I will walk through in the subsequent slides to each of these, but I would like to take this first snapshot to explain to you what is the value proposition. First, we are activating the collaborative local ecosystem. As we have collaborations with the local biotech hubs, the incubators, but also with academia, we can leverage this ecosystem to serve the tenants. We have a centralized infrastructure. It's providing core capabilities, whereas the companies can focus on science. Some of you may have started their company recently in the last 3 years. Who has most recently in the last 3 years opened a company? So I see some of those hands. And if you have done biotech, you know that this kind of preparing your lab takes a lot of time. It ends with waste management. It can be a nightmare to organize waste management. We are not an expert in waste management, but we make it happen. So we care, you care for your science, and you grow your company. And this is where you can leverage our resources and our centralized infrastructure. It's also about machine recruitment or machine lease. It's that we provide educational program. We just heard from Ionis that we sometimes, yes, we came from university, some of us are professors, we're experts in our field, but if we run a company, we need different capabilities. We don't need to be an expert in the science at the same time, in, let's say, business modeling, at the same time in fundraising, but we need to know that this is important. That means we need to educate each other so that we can speed up, to be faster than competition, and to be faster than market, to deliver faster innovation, which can be protected. IP management. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to know that needs to be ticked off. So you're nodding, so you went through all of these exercises apparently. These are the educational programs that we provide to our residents worldwide. Assets and experts, as I mentioned, 130,000 employees in J&J are there waiting to support science and entrepreneurs, innovators, to boost their projects. And we actually have established a concept that is called J-Pulse. A J-Pulse is a mentor or a buddy that supports the company in connecting the company internally, but these experts, the J-Pulse, they also have a brilliant external network that you can leverage. Each of the company is getting their J-Pulse when they move in. Funding series, we have been partner in EIT Health, in Horizon 2020, IMI, etc. I already mentioned our connectivity with the investors of the world, and that's what we also provide as a platform to the companies that are residing on our JLABS. I mentioned the cross-sector focus, and whenever we move in, as we did now into the Benelux with our JLABS, we want to brand the cluster as well. We want to pull in the expertise in the region. And that's where, when we talked this morning, Andreas and myself, I also mentioned that we don't want the companies to break down or stop activities in their institutions, be it at the academic centers. And some of you may have grown their companies, your companies, in an academic center, and you have a brilliant network. You have your machines. You have MRT machine access, PET scan access. You have lab access. You have experts in the university that serve you, and you don't want to stop this kind of interactions. But you might need to have an anchor in an institution like a JLABS. So that's where we can think of that an institution or a startup in Athens keeps their people in Athens in the institution, but they move with 1 or 2 or 5 people into a JLABS. And that's where we start connecting, because with this concept, we also connect with the Athens institution. And that's where we create in Europe a platform that is serving science and innovation. And it's not just putting everything into a central hub. So that's a principle. Please think about it, because we see companies moving in with 1 or 2 people, keep 10 people somewhere at the university. And most important for everybody when you move in, it's that we apply a no strings attached policy. That means we don't have any rights on your company at the beginning. But of course, our interest is to sign deals. So our interest is to move there. But if we say no strings attached, it's just a license agreement. There are some incubators in the world already growing from other institutions in the same direction. Some did it even before us. And this is something which is very important for the small companies to keep their ownership. And that also means, in the opposite way, or maybe in the same direction, we don't invest upfront. So you need to bring capital in, be it a 50K to survive for 1 or 2 years, or be it $1 million to even survive for 1 or 2 years. So this is the principles. In a summary, I could have brought it at the end. Maybe we recap it there as well. So these are the different items I'm walking you through now. The first one is infrastructure. These are the labs that we provide. It's operational management of the labs. It's wet labs, private offices, desktops. Some companies just have a desktop on site. We realize in the last 12 months that more and more desktop companies come in and they keep their wet labs somewhere else, which is appreciated because less wet lab management from our side is needed then. But we also provide equipment and storage. And especially for small companies, it's very important to secure their samples, to have a safe storage concept. And we have this resource hub, I talked about it through. It's powered by the JLABS partners. So we have strategic partners who provide, let's say, clinical trial management, whatever, and we have preferred partners. And these preferred partners, of course, also stay at hand or be available for you as potential residents and to be leveraged. The next one is expertise. And I talked about these experts, these JPULs. Keep it in mind, these are top-notch experts that we have internally that eventually lead our clinical trial programs or discovery departments. And these are internally connected and externally connected. Some people who move into J&J, they need a year to know where to open which door, because J&J is complex, as all of these big enterprises. But these people have been there for a while. They know how to shortcut communication or to shortcut decision processes. And that's where we decided to establish this JPULS concept. We heard it's unique. And these people, they love it. We have JPULS that serve 5 to 6 companies because they like this kind of interaction. It keeps their mind fresh as well, and they also get cutting edge or latest thinking about the innovation. So they like it, we like it, the company likes it. And we provide access to our global expertise across Johnson & Johnson. Some companies, being expert in the science, they might lack capabilities in regulatory affairs, R&D, marketing, clinical trials, market access, legal, regulatory, and even media. So I will come to that in the training later on. Funding opportunities. This is a non-complete list here, but currently we have more than 45, more than 50 VCs, family offices lining up. And since April, you see, since April 2018, these with the box around have moved in, especially the European ones, as we opened up JLABS in Europe in March this year. And we are asking the partners that we have been co-investing to join our investor hub. And we have within the JLABS facilities, we have a special room that we call the investor hub, where the investors can come in and meet the companies. Sometimes we do investors' days, where the investors meet the companies that they have interest in. Of course, the investors don't want to meet everybody because they have a preference in investing, and we advise whom to meet, and we also help the companies to prepare for these investor meetings, especially preparing pitch decks, where they sometimes just have 3 to 5 minutes to present. And when we look at the last 5 years of innovation, when I say no strings attached, there might be companies in here that have signed deals with companies that we had on site. And this is what we call no strings attached. So we have not the exclusivity on their programs, We have no right of first refusal, and many of our companies have signed deals with AbbVie, with Bayer, with Pfizer, with all of our competitors. And this is also an opportunity for the companies to present themselves to the public. And I will talk in a minute about the inside scoop, where the companies present themselves in 3-minute pitches to the world. And please maybe register for these inside scoops. It takes sometimes 3 to 4 hours, where we move through 40 companies in 3 minutes pitches. And in the last 5 years, the companies that we have in the portfolio, let's say on JLABS, have raised $10 billion US, which is a huge amount when we benchmark against other incubator programs. This is high numbers. And we did run 98 investor events. These were real investor days, not the one-to-one meetings. And these one-to-one meetings were more than 1,300 one-to-one meetings between companies and investors, because many of the companies move in because they first need to raise money to then run the experiments. And very important, of course, companies went public, 10 IPOs, 7 collaborations within JLABS companies, and we have companies that just even share the lab manager, and this is not collected here, but major collaborations, mergers between JLAB companies, 9 acquisitions. In the meantime, I think it's more than 11, because these are the numbers of mid-year. And as I mentioned, more than 100 companies signed deals with us. And you see, more than 80% of the companies are still in business. This is an important number, because we don't want to kill the companies. We want to move them in, de-risk their programs, of course, move them fast to the killer experiment. But as you see, more than 80% are still in business. So we might have selected the good ones and helped them in the right direction. Very important, which is also a key measure for us, is the companies are growing. So that's where you see where they have all started and where we, at the end of the 5 years period, have ended with an almost 8 times growth. Programming, I mentioned that we need to upskill. We need to build the capabilities. It's about how to get funding. It's about how to prepare your science and sell your science. Because when you talk to, be it IMI or Horizon 2020, be it to the VC, you need to sell it. You need to prepare it in a way that is appreciated. We do that via the programs. I just mentioned these programs, which are physical. And we invite, as we did just a couple of weeks for the Clinical Trial Innovation Day, which was a workshop, where we as Johnson & Johnson, we shared with our residents that had interest how we see clinical trials in the near future. Not as you read in the textbooks, as we see it from Johnson & Johnson's side, how we prepare, be it including wearable technology and including new analytics, etc. These are webinars. These are also globally set up. People can call in, dial in. These programs and these webinars are free for the tenants and are exclusively for the tenants and the residents. Visibility, of course, once you move into a JLABS ecosystem, you are one of the selected, let's say, 10 to 15%. This already raises your visibility, but we also make sure that we have public events where the startups and the entrepreneurs can showcase their programs, and also on the websites. And we also tweet when they raise funds, when it's public. We distribute it so that the right people get to know what they need to know. And these are the inside scoops. These are 3-minute quick pitches. It's a global viewing audience. Everybody can dial in. Our competitors, the investors, eventually universities, to eventually seek collaborations. And we do that quarterly. And that's where we have hundreds of people on the WebEx and on the conference. At the same time, we have the startups in the different occasions, be it Basel, be it Toronto, etc., Shanghai in the future. And they showcase their company in 3 minutes. Next one, 3 minutes. Next one, 3 minutes. And the investors and the audience out there knows exactly when is their, let's say, microbiome cluster showcasing their opportunities. That's where they dial in and then they dial out. And we always receive emails thereafter. I want to talk to this company. I want to have your, as a JLABS head, your, let's say, view on this company. Because we are not bound with confidentiality agreements with these startups. And that's where we can advise both sides. It's a global network. I already named it. If you are a tenant at Beerse, you can take a seat in New York City for a couple of days. When you have an interaction with the local authorities, you can then move to Shanghai, take a seat there for a couple of days, and interact with the authorities or eventually potential partners. You may ask yourself, how do they select the residents? I mentioned 450, we've had thousands of applications. The ratio is somewhere at 15% that we select. But of course, there's a pre-selection that the site heads do. But we need to be experts in that field. So if there is someone applying with a breakthrough innovation for biofuel, we might not be the right partner because we don't do biofuel. That's where we need to be an expert. And that means if we look at that, what is out there, and if we look at the applications, we need to ask ourselves, do we have the capabilities? Do we have the bandwidth? Can we support this company? And if it's off strategy, we most likely cannot support this company because we don't have the capabilities. We cannot just provide an access to J&J. We need to be experts there. And that's where this comes in. First, we want things to be on strategy. But if we see something which is absolutely breakthrough in healthcare, we might start trying to convince our scientists to eventually build expertise there together. But this is an exemption. There need to be compelling science and/or technology. It needs an area of unmet medical need and/or significant market. It needs to be a credible science and a technology team. And that's what you already hear from VCs. They look at the team. The team needs to be able to deliver. And sometimes we see startups applying where we have doubts about the team, where we might say, no or not yet. You need to first fully venture. You need to build your team first before we can engage. And we recommend certain steps. And then maybe a couple of months later, we come together and then we say yes. At the same time, they need to be able to meet the financial obligations. And we say of the license agreement, because we charge them. We charge them for the desk. People come in with the company and they get a hot desk. They can move when there is free place. They can move in and find their place. But if they want to have a private office, the charge is higher. If they want to have a private office plus a lab seat, it's higher. You know, this is the business of incubators. Some incubators, I heard you have various of these incubators here in Athens as well. Some of them are private, and they run a business model with a profitability XYZ. We don't run the profitability model, but we charge them. At the same time, they need to be able to pay for the charges for the license agreement. So they need to be able to meet their financial agreements. And then, if it's on strategy, if we see this is all ticked, then we move into the selection committee, and the companies get notification or rejection, but they get feedback. And as I just mentioned, it can be that they get feedback, your team is not ready. Science is exciting, but the team is not ready, or you don't have the right financing as we see it. And then they need to do an extra loop. And they get feedback. And this selection committee is meeting every 14 days. That means companies, when they apply, they get feedback in between 3 weeks. As a principle, we don't see confidential information, we don't sign CDAs, we don't own any IP at the start, and we don't have rights of first refusal at the beginning. But it might be that we move together, and that's our intent. If we see the breakthrough, we sign the deal eventually after 1 week. But we need to see the science then. We need to be convinced. And I talked about the QuickFire Challenges. It's one of, or these are the programs where we see the science and the breakthrough out there in the world. And if we look at the portfolio of the QuickFire Challenges, it sounds sometimes very high level, like Mobile Wellness Challenge or European Innovation, where we just asked about the healthcare innovation programs that are out there where you wanted to apply for 100,000 euros grant. But by these QuickFire Challenges, we get hundreds of applications. And we walk through these applications, And that's where we see the beauty and the science out there. And we also reconnect with these applicants and ask them specifically about, tell us, what's about this, what's about that. That's how also we source innovation through these QuickFire Challenges. And as I mentioned, they are global, some are regional, they are focusing cross-sector, and watch out for those. And for those who are interested, visit the QuickFire Challenge website on our JLABS website. Success. I will come to the last slides. You also want to see some numbers. Pharmaceuticals, we are heavy on pharmaceuticals currently in our portfolio. Currently we have more than 450 companies. As I said, these are the numbers a couple of months ago. Total portfolio, more than 450 companies. And 50 companies just joined in the last months in the second half of this year. You see heavy weighted on pharmaceuticals, but medical device is catching up, especially because of the technology companies that are moving in. And nothing better than the tenants and the residents talking about what have they achieved, what have they gained in the past, not only the money, but also the speed. Because sometimes people are very pushy from our side, the scientists, also the business people, to move fast. And that's where we want to move fast with the companies and also deliver as soon as possible the killer experiments or the next inflection point. And that's where the statement of Dinu, who talks about the success that they have had in this time that they normally would have had spent eventually 5 times more in the past. I thank you for your attention, and if you're interested, as I said, I will be here around for coffee. We just, as I mentioned, started the JLABS in Europe. We currently have 10 seats covered. We have at least 30 more, 20 more, 30 more seats in our JLABS at Beerse. That can be 20, 30 more companies. There can be 1 or 2 or maybe 5 coming out of this cluster. Depends on the applications. We are not proactively reaching out and trying to scout. We give these kind of talks to attract the right companies and waiting for your applications. Thank you very much. Do we have time for questions?
Definitely. I have a question.
Yes, please.
From those, you can elaborate on the biotech in Switzerland. From those 275 pharma companies, how many products have entered your late-stage pipeline?
The question was of how many of these 275 companies have entered our late-stage pipeline. These are early-stage startups, and if we all recall biotech, it takes us a lead time of 7 to 10 years, and we have not one company that is commercialized.
Yeah, thank you for the nice presentation. I wanted to ask you, you mentioned that the JLABS you have available bench space and equipment and storage. Could you elaborate a little bit on that? Because, for example, a small company might have needs for some type of equipment that they cannot invest in, or...
Yes. What's your affiliation?
So my name is Konstantin Tamvakopoulos, and I'm actually representing a research institute, the Biomedical Research Foundation of the Academy of Athens.
It's a very good question, and we are providing the residents with the standard machines, be it incubators, be it freezers, be it plate readers, centrifuges. This is all for free. This is part of the rental. If there's a company that needs a very special machine, we might, and this is only for this one company, we need to discuss about the rental and about the lease, because that's maybe where we need to lease the machine. If there's 2, 3 companies, if we see it's going to be leveraged by these residents, then we find a solution. And especially in Beerse, we are in the middle of our research campus, where we have 4,200 basic researchers and also pharmacovigilance people, etc. But this is a hub where we have lots of machines. And that's where we, very often we, let's say, refurbish also the lab with machines that we have. So we try to serve the residents with the machines that they need. If they need an MRT machine, we might run out of our specification, where we then need to talk about potential partnerships. But that's where I already mentioned this activation of the ecosystem, because this machine might be in the, let's say, Erasmus University or at EMEA or at KU Leuven, where we have partnerships, and eventually these companies then connect with these institutions to then leverage their machines. Second point, we just signed a partnership with a lab service company, and they have machines around the world, and if we need access to a certain machine that this lab service company has available, we ask them to provide that to the residents. So that's where they also can already, this lab service company already start doing business with the startups, and some of them grow very rapidly, and once you have a good provider, you seldomly change it. Does that answer your question? Yes.
Thank you for your excellent presentation. I'm Theodore Zafiropoulos, Managing Director of Zafiropoulos Group and Board Member of Hellenic Biocluster. A quick question. What would be the requirements and the initiative for considering establishing a JLAB in Greece?
That's a very good question. We have landscaped actually Europe, Middle East, Africa, and we looked at the regions where we have the capital, money, where we have the science in terms of universities, and where we have industry on site. Because we need to have this intimacy between money, academia, and industry. And once we see that, we start evaluating, and then we map against each other. And when we look across Europe, we have seen clusters like Paris, let's say the Golden Triangle in London, Cambridge, Oxford, also looking at Leuven, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and that's where clusters like the Hellenic cluster need to compete with. And once we see that this is really getting to the appropriate level, we may think about expanding to these clusters. So that's where we landscape, and we are not venturing, we are not a development company. So that's where we have seen like Marseille partners or Berlin partners. These are companies that develop a region. And I just realized, or I learned today, that HBio is also one of those, let's say, institutions that start developing a cluster. And that needs to be there. That's why I highly welcome this initiative. We are, as Katharina Papatomas also represents Janssen, a partner within this HBio. But this is not a JLABS initiative. JLABS is going to come once the cluster or the city or the region is matured to a certain stage where we can come in and further incubate, but not venture. But it doesn't hold us from attracting a company from your hub. So if there is a company or 2 or 5 that want to apply to have a seat in Bears or in New York, then open for these applications.
It's actually, thanks a lot, Guenter. I mean, a very interesting presentation. It's a follow-on question from this one. Because it's central, let's say, to the thought processes within bio. Is there a competitive advantage we can offer to the international scene? And obviously, we cannot compete or begin to entertain the concept of providing something broad as localities such as Munich or Berlin or Cambridge or Paris have to offer. But an idea would be, do we have a chance to do something if we focus and we try and find some niche? Let's say, I mean, there's a discussion around clinical trials and Greece becoming a sort of a clinical trial center for pharmaceuticals. So the question is, if we found such a niche, whether on our own, whether be it on our own, or in discussion with, let's say, pharmaceutical companies, would that be a sufficient sort of setup for you guys to consider, or you're just looking for broad sort of opportunity?
No, very good point, and you need to be focused. So if you're spreading too thin in your approach and HBio, if you would ask me for advice, I would say you will never spill up. But if you have a certain area where you say that's an area where we have expertise, where we have the right universities, where we already have a start of industry, that could be a unique opportunity. And you have seen the Israeli cluster, and they have been excellent in digital. They move very fast in digital. So whenever you ask people, and we talked about Microsoft, because these companies, they look at Israel and Haifa, Tel Aviv, and that's where they made their point. So my recommendation is yes, pick the right one and move fast. Which one it is, I cannot tell you. You know your strengths better than me. So again, thank you for your attention, and I will be around during the coffee break and lunch. Thank you.